Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, publisher of Roofing Contractor and Walls and Ceilings magazines. Today is May 5th, 2020. Thank you so much for watching our weekly legal updates. I'm here today with Art Eisner, the editor of Roofing Contractor, and Trent Cotney, the CEO of Cotney Construction Law. If you know Trent or have been keeping up with our videos with him, you know that he battles legal issues for all contractors across the country, especially since he has 14 offices, 40 plus attorneys, 4 customer service reps that take care of all the contractors. So you can follow him on Facebook or LinkedIn and stay up on his legal insights. And from here, Art, I'd like to turn it over to you to ask Trent some questions.
Great, thanks Jill, and Trent, thanks as always for joining us, and hello to everyone out there. Trent, let's start off with the topic of this week. As it kind of was last week, we're starting to see the gradual reopening of the economy and construction zones in particular across the country. Any changes in what you're hearing and any concerns from your clients, and any updates you can provide on that?
Sure. Well, as always, Jill and Art, it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you guys. You know, I really enjoy the opportunity to be able to kind of address and educate contractors out there on what the issues are, because like you said, things are changing daily. And what's interesting in the position that we're at now is, if you remember a couple of months ago, it was everyone was freaking out because all these essential business orders were coming out. Well, now everybody's freaking out because it's starting to reopen and nobody can figure out exactly what they're supposed to do or how they're supposed to do it. So, you know, we've had a lot of very interesting reopening issues out in California and elsewhere. And that's been one of the biggest things that we've kind of had to navigate now. I would say that the biggest question that we've gotten here recently is whether or not contractors should return their PPP funds, their Paycheck Protection Program funds. And let me explain why people are freaking out about that. Okay, not this last Sunday, but the Sunday before, the SBA came out with some additional guidance, and the guidance was scary. It said, hey, if you have access to liquidity, okay, and the only example they gave is if you're a public corporation and you have access to the capital markets, and you don't need the funds, you have to give them back by May 7th. Okay, that's sort of the safe harbor. Okay, so they're retroactively creating some new limitations on it. Okay, originally when you applied for the Paycheck Protection Program loan funds, the application is very simple, and all you had to do was attest to the fact that the current economic conditions made it uncertain as to whether or not you'd be able to continue your ongoing operations. That's pretty vague, right? Well, this new guidance, when it's talking about liquidity, it's caused a lot of concern among contractors, because it doesn't define whether or not access to a credit line is liquidity. Okay, you know, just is it? I don't know. And that's the issue is the guidance, they're filling in the holes that was in the CARES Act originally with this retroactive guidance, and it's causing a lot of people concern. Now, one thing I will tell you, Art, is that if you've received over $2 million in PPP funds, you are absolutely going to be audited. Okay, it's a mandatory audit unless they change things again. So you need to recognize that that's an additional level of scrutiny. What we're advising our customers, you know, contractors and tradesmen that call us, is just be very, very conservative. Recognize that this is a moving target and will continue to be a moving target. So if you are in a position where you need the funds, absolutely don't feel guilty about taking them. But if you have access to cash, if you have access to significant credit, if you have access to what they call liquidity, then you need to at least take that into account before May 7th. Now, you had the capability of either withdrawing your application by May 7th or returning the funds by May 7th. Okay, so that has been one of the biggest questions. Right before I came on this call, I had 2 emails, literally one right after another, saying, do I get my funds back? And the best that we can tell people is be very conservative. Here's the guidance that they've said. You know, they are retroactively applying this. Now, there's some legal arguments there if need be, but right now, this is what it is. So, you know, proceed with caution.
Wow. Let me just throw in a couple follow-ups here. So is
Sure.
there any possibility for an extension on May 7th? That is 2 days away.
Mm-hmm.
And Also, what you were talking about with filling in the guidance or filling the holes with these guidelines, I know we're in unprecedented times, but is that an unprecedented way of doing things as well, or does that happen when you have to kind of push through legislation as what happened with the CARES Act?
So the answer to the first question is right now there hasn't been any indication that there is an extension on that. Okay, May 7th is the safe harbor. So you have to make a choice by then. We have a lot of contractors that are still on standby, hoping that there's some more guidance that comes out between now and the 7th to answer questions like, if I have a loan, does that count as liquidity? What's the interest rate? If I have a 5% loan, does that, and that's the problem, is there really isn't a significant amount of guidance on it. So to answer your second question, anytime that you've got sort of this accelerated rulemaking or accelerated legislation, it's not going to be that good. Okay, there's going to be holes that you could plow a battleship through, and that's what happened with the CARES Act. Okay, I took my first read of the CARES Act, and it's really boring. Trust me. But I read through the whole thing, and I've got my legal hat on. I'm just looking at it. What does this mean? It doesn't make any sense. So what they're doing is they're trying to fill in those holes. The problem is that it's created this huge amount of uncertainty, this huge amount of concern, not only among contractors and consumers that are out there, but among banks. Nobody knows what's going on. And, a lot of times what will happen is new statutes or laws or rules will come out, and then it's up to the case law, the courts, to kind of define what those statutes or rules mean. In this case, it's a little bit different because literally every single week there's new guidance which slightly moves the target a little bit. The best guidance that we can give contractors right now is just be very conservative. If you have a ton of cash that's sitting and operating now, if you have access to all kinds of credit capability, you need to take that into account. Okay, you need to look at your situation, and obviously, if you're taking over $2 million. That's that level of scrutiny, which I would take it even a step further and say, okay, I know that I'm going to be audited. We've already seen some companies be the poster children of people that shouldn't be taking loans. You don't want to be that person. So proceed with caution is all I'm saying. Doesn't mean you have to give your money back. It just means you really need to kind of assess it and think about it and recognize that, right now there's some unknowns and uncertainties.
Wow. Well, let's pivot, although it is a bit on the same topic. In your most recent guest column for us exclusively on roofingcontractor.com, you talk about debt cancellation during this crisis and how that applies also to companies receiving Paycheck Protection Program funding. Mm-hmm. What are some of the key takeaways you hope roofers can get from that piece?
So yeah, I encourage everybody to check that out on your website, because it was fantastic for you guys to publish that, and I think there's some great information there for contractors to read. I would say there's a couple of things as we start getting past. I call this sort of the honeymoon period right now. Okay, everybody still is has production. Most consumers are still either on unemployment or are receiving stimulus checks. But that is going to run out here quickly, okay? And when that runs out, that's when your accounts receivable is in trouble, okay? That's when the owners and the contractors that have been paying you may stop paying you. So one of the things that we've talked about a lot, we've tried to sound the alarm on, is make sure that you are taking whatever your normal AR schedule is and shrinking it by 30 days, okay? So if normally you've got a plan and a standard operating procedure that works on emails and calls and things of that nature, to shrink it within a shorter time frame, because that money is going to be here today and gone today. So you need to get it as quickly as you can. Now, occasionally you're going to end up in a situation where you just have bad debt. Okay, we all have that. We all have that uncollectible debt. And one of the techniques and tactics that you can potentially use is engage in debt forgiveness. So just the same way that back during the foreclosure crisis, a bank would forgive certain debt, you can send out a similar notice, similar to 1099-C notice, that says, hey, you are forgiving this debt. And in the event that that debt is forgiven, then the IRS may tax that individual based on that forgiven debt, depending on their situation. Okay, it's not a guarantee, but it is a taxable event. So even if the customer isn't paying you, they may have to pay Uncle Sam. So that's a benefit from a collection standpoint. On the other side of things, you want to think about forgiveness from the Paycheck Protection Program standpoint. Right now, we're just trying to figure out what the PPP program is, right? But pretty soon we're going to get to that 8-week period where people start looking at forgiveness. And that forgiveness portion raises some questions into play. You know, is it a 1099 forgiveness where it could potentially be a taxable event? Probably, you know, and that's the kind of thing where you have to. I said when I remember a few weeks ago, we were talking about this when it came out, and I said, you know, the government never hands something out for free. There's always strings attached. And this is something that people really want to keep in mind, that it is, they need to take into account not only what's in front of their face as far as the funds, but what their tax situation looks like, and make sure they are making the right decisions. It's a complicated framework. And it can be the difference in, you know, tens of thousands of dollars potentially, depending on what your situation is.
And you mentioned the 1099-Cs. I was interested to read that that those alone, though, may not constitute evidence of a discharge or canceled debt. So there may be contractors out there that think they're in the clear and really not.
It's possible, yeah, absolutely, and it's important to understand that we always say that anytime that you get one of those notices, or you're not 100% certain what your status is, to consult with tax lawyer, consult with the CPA, so that you understand which direction to go in. You know, one of the things that contractors, if they're sending out these debt notices, so let's say they're not receiving it, let's say they're sending it out. You've made a strategic choice there. So you need to understand that if you've made that choice to forgive that debt, you can't go back and start to collect it again. Okay, that's from the standpoint of somebody that's actively trying to forgive debt. But oftentimes, you know, just the fact that you received a 1099-C, it could be, it could not be. There's a lot of issues there. And what we recommend is make sure you touch base with your CPA so you know where you stand at the end of the year. You don't want to misallocate certain debt if for some reason it's not properly done in the first place.
You do also mention a bankruptcy case in Iowa that does kind of shed some hope. But you know, what's the likelihood of of other courts getting to recognize that and for that to become precedent?
Yeah, you know, it's uncertain right now. I think one thing that we will start seeing here shortly is a rise in what's known as creditors' rights in bankruptcy proceedings. Okay, so I think you're going to have a lot of new law that's going to be made here, especially as it relates to Paycheck Protection Program. Okay, there may be specific guidance that the SBA or the U.S. Department of Treasury puts out on it. In fact, I would anticipate that prior to any case law coming out on it. But we have already kind of geared up here in preparation for both creditors' rights and Chapter 11s and Chapter 7s. And just to kind of briefly describe what that is for the contractors watching this, creditors' rights are when you're a creditor, meaning that somebody owes you money and your debtor has filed bankruptcy. So you have to pursue that debtor in bankruptcy court. And in order to do that, you file a proof of claim. There's other things that you have to do to try to get paid through the bankruptcy court, okay? Now, there's a bunch of different numbers in bankruptcy, but there's two that you really need to pay attention to, okay? The first one is Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is reorganization of a business. It means that they're not going under necessarily. They can always convert to Chapter 7, which is liquidation. But what it means is there might still be some money there for you, okay? And I've said before, this is the time where any contractor out there really needs to consider perfecting their lien rights, because their lien rights normally will act as a secured claim. And everyone knows, even if you don't know anything about bankruptcy, everybody generally knows that a secured creditor gets paid more than an unsecured creditor. Okay, so that's Chapter 11. Chapter 7 is liquidation. And that means that there's nothing, more than likely there's nothing there. Okay. Should you still file a proof of claim if you're a contractor? And a proof of claim is basically a claim saying, here's how much I'm owed. Doesn't hurt, but at the end of the day, there's probably not going to be anything there. We're going to see a lot of this. And I don't anticipate, we won't really start seeing it until probably the end of June, July, August moving forward, but you're going to see it from a lot of big names, and then you're going to start to see it from a lot of smaller businesses. So, getting up to speed, at least on what your requirements and your deadlines are for submitting those claims, are going to be critical. You will get notice. You should get notice. And the key is just making sure that you're a part of the process.
Wow. Looking at all that too, the IRS still also hasn't issued their guidance on debt cancellations during this pandemic, have they? And any idea if that will happen?
Yeah, I would anticipate they're going to have to do something here. The other thing that causes me some concern is the fact that the government's just printing money, nonstop. I mean, I don't know how many billions and trillions that they've printed at this point, but that has an effect. Okay, there is a price to pay for that. And at some point, the money runs out. So we've seen a lot of the states have already kind of buckled a little bit under the pressure from unemployment claims. Okay, same thing's going to happen federally is at some point, you just can't keep throwing money at the problem because the money's going to be devalued or you've got increased interest or whatever the issues are. I'm not an economist. I just know it's a problem. Okay, so I think ultimately what will happen is that the IRS and the Federal Reserve will come out with some additional guidance to help figure out what's what. And specifically, I think the U.S. Department of Treasury, along with the SBA, will try to address some of these debt forgiveness issues. It's going to be a very, very difficult situation because, again, the federal government has, in my opinion, almost overextended itself too early in the process. There's been too much that's happened at the very beginning. My concern is not necessarily now. It's end of third quarter, fourth quarter, and there may not be the capability to assist then like there is now. So I don't know, and it's not necessarily their fault because no one could figure out what was going on here. We didn't know. We still don't know what's going on. We could be talking about coronavirus this time next year. I don't know. I hope not. I hope it's a thing of the past, but that's the problem is nobody, hindsight's always 2020. But my concern is at some point, I think the government help is going to run out and then, you're kind of stuck with what you got.
We're here in the first week of May. Tell us normally, is this a time where you're hearing from clients about how to ramp up for their summer operations for peak season? And are you hearing some of those same questions now? And how are you advising contractors to kind of do that, given everything that's changed?
So that's a great question, Art, and it's kind of a catch-22 because if you are in a storm-prone area, and it doesn't have to be hurricane area, it doesn't have to be Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida. We've had tons of hailstorms all over the Midwest, all over the place, really damaging winds. I'm sure many of you saw the report from Nashville the other day where I thought I was looking at Florida for a second. I was like, wow, what is this? So those storms are everywhere. And if you're not ready to capitalize on that, then you're going to miss the mark. So I think that, I would say, yes, the amount of calls that we've had regarding contractor preparedness for storm season has probably gone down. The questions that we're getting is, how much should we have in supply? How much should we have in inventory? Everybody says inventory kills, but you got to have it on hand. And at some point there might be a supply chain issue. You need to make sure that you've got everything that you need on hand for storm season and that you can capitalize on it because it's, that is something that should continue, especially if insurance is involved. So if insurance is involved, there's still some potential to have money flowing, even if it's not consumer generated or consumer based. So I would encourage every contractor out there to make sure that regardless of what type of trade or business they're in, to look towards the service work, the maintenance work, the storm work, anything where it's going to be not necessarily recession or depression proof, but maybe fare a little bit better during hard times.
Do you fear that there will be some contractors out there with a business as usual approach and, they'll have a harsh awakening?
There are, and I've heard it over and over again. And I've heard too much and I've seen too much to think that is the case. I just don't. I think even the contractors that are doing well now, unless they're doing federal work or they're so insulated that they don't have anything to worry about, are going to experience something. So what I encourage everybody that's listening to this is take steps now. I don't care how great you're doing. Please just take some precautionary steps now. What does that mean? Okay, that means really looking at your cost, going down your payables, figuring out where you can, make cuts if necessary. Look at your critical employees, figure out if you need to downsize, how do you do it? Have a plan in place. Okay, prepare for it. Even if everything is great, then you can just say, hey, Trent, that guy's a dummy. But at the end of the day, I would rather people be prepared. And that's what I'm concerned about for the industry out there, because we've been blessed and fortunate that construction has pretty much been an essential business. And that's why most of our trades and contractors out there haven't seen the full effect yet. Okay, if we were in the restaurant industry or travel industry, we'd be really hurting right now. So don't let that mislead you, because once we get over this honeymoon period, we got 30 million plus in unemployment. All the signs show that it's not going to be a quick recovery. It will be very slow and very painful.
Are clients voicing their concerns to you about jobs drying up? And how are you telling them to get creative?
Mm-hmm. Yes, especially new construction is, unless you've got existing projects, I've seen reports that it's down by almost 85%. So new construction, private work, way down. Okay. Large scale jobs, I've had many of them suspended, delayed or terminated. People aren't willing to, develop like they used to. So I think what you have to do is improvise, adapt, and overcome. I think you need to be able to pivot. And those companies that can pivot and adapt to this new world order are going to be the companies that do well, not just survive, but do well. So what does that mean? That means figuring out where the demand is and then adapting to that demand. So I mentioned a few examples, service work, maintenance work, repairs, the quick things that can keep a consumer happy, but not necessarily entail a full makeover, are the kind of things that you can sell quickly. Okay. Figuring out creative ways to sell. Okay, I mentioned everybody hates lawyers, right? This is a great time to use legal as a sales tool. Okay, it is a tremendous sales tool because everybody's scared to death about COVID. If you come to it, let's say you're doing residential, and I know you guys have a lot of residential contractors that are watching this, use job site protection plans, use job site safety sheets, use all that stuff to say, here's why I'm a differentiator. Okay, I know you're scared about having us on a job site. We're not gonna get anywhere near you. Okay, we're going to do this job. We're going to be a ghost. We're going to be out of here. You're going to be happy. And trust me, it's our guarantee. Okay. And there's a lot of ways to use safety, to use legal to your advantage so that you can continue to sell jobs. And that's the most critical thing right now is leads are tough to come by. Convert them quickly. Adapt to using video capability, remote DocuSign type contracts that allow you to convert while you have them on the phone. Because if you hang up, they may have time to think about it. They may go on to the next contractor. You want to be able to convert and have them, if you've got them on the phone, if you've got them on video, be able to have everything at your fingertips so you can convert them then.
Got it. So it definitely increases the urgency of the timing. Before all this happened, the workforce crunch in our industry was really shifted things to a high efficiency mode. When you talk about the delays, should we now expect projects to be scheduled longer? Will things simply take more time to complete because of safety measures, because of sanitation, any of these other issues that have come up because of the pandemic?
I think so. I think initially there's going to be some downtime on projects just because of new procedures, whether it's social distancing or, before if you needed something, you could gather at the job site trailer, iron stuff out, get back to work. Now you got to hop on Zoom and or GoToMeeting or whatever people are using. You may not have the capability to communicate as rapidly. I do think that in any crisis situation like this, you're going to see some significant innovation. Okay, I think coming out of this, we're going to revolutionize how construction is done. And I've always said, when I'm not reading cases or going to hearings or doing whatever I've got to do legally, I think about the industry and I think about how inefficient construction is, just how it's been done the same exact way for the last 300 years. It's ripe for change. And I think that's where innovation and technology is going to come in to address a lot of the inefficiencies. So to answer your question, Art, I think people need to factor in additional time to get projects completed. They need to make sure that their contracts account for pandemic related delays and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, there's going to be some shining stars that are working right now to make sure that innovation and technology comes forward to make projects more efficient.
Got it. And I think maybe that was framed more so on the commercial side. Do you think it may be more important for roofing companies to tell homeowners that, a one-day tear-off, it might not be the same, it may not be as quick as it used to be?
Mm-hmm. So managing customer expectations is paramount regardless of whether you're in a pandemic or not. But now more than ever, homeowners need handholding. Okay, you've got to be able to tell them we got you here. Constant communication, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the person that's selling the job or the person that's putting on the roof, but somebody in your office needs to be in constant communication with that homeowner, because it's like I said, every lead is precious, every job is precious. Okay, just because you've got a decent backlog now doesn't mean that you'll have that 2 months from now. And what I think that, if you were normally used to doing a job in 1 or 2 days, you should probably factor in double the time. Okay, and it doesn't mean that you're going to take that. But if you manage your customers' expectations and you get done early, then you look that much better, right?
True enough.
Right.
Let's. You talked about innovators. I want to change topics a little bit and talk about a post we just had this week about Tesla CEO Elon Musk talking about the 26% drop in his company's solar roof installations in the first quarter, of course, due to the coronavirus. That said, he still, pledges to work with trained roofing contractors and scale up to 1,000 homes a week. You've been watching him enter into this market. What's your take on where he's headed, and what did that news mean to you, if anything?
Tesla is a very interesting company, and look, they're innovators. Nobody can say that. They're disruptors. That's what they're known for, and their product is very interesting. I had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time learning about it, and I think it's a very innovative product. I think one of the situations, and probably what Elon is concerned about right now, is the fact that this is a premium type product, and if you haven't, just because you're investing in the potential energy savings, people aren't looking into that right now. They are more concerned about cost. If they have to put on a roof and they have a choice of doing a high-end product or a low-end product with an immediate effect, they're probably going to choose a low-end product. So I'm sure that is probably factoring into some decision-making that's happening right now. I think ultimately what Tesla has done is great for our industry, because it's caused everybody else to kind of take a look and say, oh, okay, well, we need to step up our game, and that's the great thing about disruptors. Tesla he wasn't known for doing anything in construction really until this happened. And now everybody's talking about it. Everybody's thinking along those lines. And I think ultimately down the road, regardless of whether it's roofing or wall construction or anything out there, you're going to see these integrated products that accomplish multiple things in one project. I talked about efficiency, and you're going to see efficiency in process, efficiency in materials, efficiency in design and construction. All of this is going to be revolutionized. If there's any upside to the pandemic, is that technology has to step up now. It's got to step up, and you're going to see, instead of us going like this, I think you're going to see like this as a result of this pandemic. So, I will always watch what Elon Musk does, because you never know what to expect. He's come out with things where I'm like, there's no way that's ever going to do well. And then he kills it. And I'm like, so I think, I think you'd be foolish not to pay attention to what they're doing right now.
All right. Well said. And final question, since you do represent companies in different fields, how would you characterize overall the roofing industry's response to what's happening now, perhaps compared to some others that you represent?
So Roofing has done a great job, and I say this often. The roofing industry is like family, and it really is. I had the opportunity to make some great friendships and relationships through the industry, including you guys. And I think overall everybody has stepped up and recognized this, and we've all kind of circled the wagons so that we can make sure that the industry is protected. The associations out there have done a tremendous job, whether it's, NRCA or Western States or FRSA or, CRCA or any of the other associations that are out there. They've all stepped up, done a great job in educating, done a great job in making sure that their voices are heard as sort of the focal point for the members. And overall, I think we've weathered the storm about as well as we could as an industry. Roofing in particular, and for those that are doing exterior wall construction, any building envelope type of construction, we're always in the crosshairs, right? Because we're highly visible. And when you're highly visible, you're subject to every government regulatory agency there is because they can see you. So there's a lot of that you have to deal with. There's a lot of liability. There's just a lot of problems. But as a whole, I think the roofing industry has done a great job in stepping up to the plate and adapting and trying to work in the current framework. So I'd give it a solid A, I think.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm biased, but.
Right. Good grade. Yes. But Trent, we obviously appreciate your leadership on that. And thanks for the great information. I'll turn it back over to you, Jill.
Thank you very much. Yes, Trent, it's always good to hear your insight. I know you got some resources on your website, I believe. Can you tell us again what that is?
Sure. So we have a very lengthy and robust COVID-19 database. And what I try to do is put out videos all the time and articles and all that kind of stuff to educate contractors and trades out there. So if you go to our website, cottonycl.com, it's right on the front page, COVID-19 database. You can go there. We have all of our articles, including links to the great articles that you guys were mentioning. And we try to put out videos and whatnot on Facebook, LinkedIn, and other social media sources for people to follow.
Fabulous. We really appreciate everything you're doing, Trent, for all contractors across the country. And again, thank you everyone for watching and joining us today. If you do need to reach myself or Art or anybody at Walls and Ceilings, please go to either roofingcontractor.com or wconline.com and make sure you subscribe for free to our digital edition, our e-newsletters, and all of the content we put out so you can stay up to date with the great content we're putting out, especially our weekly updates with Trent. But everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Everybody have a great day.